Tell you this, when we came to office in 2018, I would completely agree with you. Thousands of jobs have left the province. The previous government, Liberal government, had decided that we were going to transition the economy to a service economy.
But Minister, you have 6 years.
We said we would do differently, and that is why we have started to restore the economy of the province of Ontario following the devastation that was left behind. That is why 700,000 jobs have been created by our small, medium, and large enterprises across the province of Ontario. That is why $40 billion worth of investments have come to the province of Ontario in your own community, despite the fact that Liberals were in power for 15 years.
Can we concentrate on housing? Because the housing is the major issue
it's about
here.
Building communities. You asked me about bringing hope back to people, and I completely agree with you. Hope is about jobs. Hope is about education. Hope is about transit and transportation to get to those jobs. Hope is about housing. Hope is about affordability. When I look at hope, I look at all of the things that make a family grow and prosper. That is why my family came here. Number one issue facing young Ontarians who want to get into the housing market right now are high interest rates. You've heard it over and over and over again.
But Minister, there could be high interest rate, but if there is no housing, there's no sense we talk about high interest rates.
The high interest rates have stopped our home builders from building. The high interest rates have kept thousands of people out of the market with an inability to actually be able to afford those housings. You talk about affordable housing. Let's talk about the numbers on affordable housing. The agreement that was signed by the previous Liberal government in 2018 called on us to build 19,000.
But Minister, you have 6 years, 6 years on this file. 6 years on this file, and we're in a housing crisis right now.
Let me get to the answer.
I want to be the voice for the young people.
Okay. So let me give you the specific answer.
I have my time on the floor.
The specific answer is that we were asked to build, the previous government set a target of building 19,000 affordable housing units. We've built 11,000. The previous government set a target of 26,000 units to be rehabilitated, refurbished in your own community. You know how old, outdated that stock of housing in your community is. You know the housing on Galloway, you know the housing on Danzig, you know the housing at Lawrence and Morningside. It was outdated, it was old. Many of those units were taken out and were not available to people to live in. We smashed that target, 123,000 units.
Minister, we're still in a crisis. We're still in a crisis.
Exactly.
We're still in a crisis.
A crisis that acknowledgedly started under the previous government that we are fixing.
6 years ago.
That we are fixing. And the best thing that we can do to help new and young Ontarians is give them jobs, build a stronger economy. We're doing that. And the next best thing that we can do is get interest rates down so that young Ontarians can get into their first home, and so that the people who build homes and communities can afford to get shovels in the ground. We had the fastest interest rates increases ever in this country. It is unacceptable, and at a time when we want to continue to build the province of Ontario,
thank you very much.
B.
Crawford.
Mr. Calandra, for being here today. We really appreciate it. I have a couple questions. I'd like to start with a general question, and then I'll have a specific question pertaining to the bill. So you are correct in that for 15 years we had mismanagement of the economy. We had overburdensome regulations that did send jobs out. In fact, we had 380,000 regulations in Ontario, the most in any jurisdiction in the world. So I believe this bill and this government is committed to reducing that regulatory burden to make Ontario a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Could you just give a general commentary as it pertains to this bill in terms of how we are reducing regulations to ensure we continue on that path to prosperity?
Yeah, it's the work of the Red Tape Reduction Ministry has been phenomenal, and has been one of the main reasons why the province of Ontario is now in a position where we have welcomed back billions of dollars worth of investments, where we have encouraged thousands of jobs to come back. Look, 700,000 jobs have been created by our small, medium, and large enterprises. Think of that. When we talk about the success that is Ontario, despite the challenges that this province faced back in 2018, despite the current challenges we face with the federal government whose spending is out of control, who have raised interest rates to levels faster than has ever happened at any other time, despite the red tape that they are putting in the way, Ontario has been able to attract 700,000 jobs, over $40 billion worth of investments. And a lot of that is due to the work of the Red Tape Reduction Commission. You talked about this. So we have removed about $8 billion, a little over $8 billion in the cost of doing business in the province of Ontario. $8 billion. That is money that has gone directly to our job creators. And they have come through in a way that is incredible. They're creating wealth and opportunity for Ontarians. When you look at the measures in this, another $1 billion we've hit in direct savings for people and businesses, over 1.5 million hours in savings for people and businesses. We're moving towards ensuring that those who do business in the province of Ontario can do it faster, know what it is that they have to accomplish, and we're making it more affordable for them to do it. And then on the opposite token, we have heard over and over and over again, anybody who ever has to deal with their government, whether it's a municipal government or provincial government, the fear having to go to the Ministry of Service Ontario office or having to go get a permit. We are putting very real steps in place that reduces people's need to interact with the government, making it seamless, and where they do, putting timelines in place so that they know where they are in the process and what they have to accomplish. We've reduced red tape and regulation massively in the province of Ontario, and we are leaders, and it is the extraordinary work of the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction that has helped us get there. And the businesses have shown when you do it, they will come through and choose Ontario.
That's definitely appreciated. And the fact that we actually have a ministry dedicated to red tape reduction, I think, is important. Question on the, as it pertains to parking in buildings that are built near transit stations. So this bill in particular reduces the minimum amount of parking in, I guess, towers that are located near GO Transit or subway facilities. How is that going to facilitate new housing?
Yeah, this was first of all, it brings down the cost per unit significantly, and I heard this this throughout our travels in southern Ontario. The Guelph mayor, for instance, had suggested that this would be an incredibly important measure to help him when it comes to housing around his major transit station areas. It reduces costs. It helps better utilize the infrastructure that we're putting in place. Let's all remember that Ontario is in the midst of the largest infrastructure on transit and transportation infrastructure build in our history. Right, it's not just new subways in Toronto. It's expanding the GO train, expanded GO train service to my community up in Stouffville. I know many of our colleagues on both sides of the table are getting expanded two-way all-day GO trains. It's including expanding of roads across the province. So by focusing on where the infrastructure is being built, it helps people make choices. It reduces the cost of those units, and I think it is a measure that will increase affordability, increase options, and increase supply, and help us better utilize those billions in infrastructure investments.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it to my colleague.
MPP Ray.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here this morning. I just want to begin, Chair, by saying it's kind of ironic. The NDP talks about infrastructure, and they voted against our most recent provincial budget. We're investing over $3 billion in infrastructure, a historic amount in Ontario. For the people who may be watching, the federal government is only proposing $6 billion across all of Canada. Ontario, we are going alone and investing $4 billion or $3 billion to get shovels in the ground. I think it's also very telling that the NDP members, their number one concern is making Justin Trudeau happy. I know Jagmeet Singh's number one job is making sure Justin Trudeau remains happy, but I think it's very telling that the Ontario NDP is pursuing that same course of action. I know our members on this side of the committee in the House will be focused on fighting for the people of Ontario in that aspect. And I know the independent Liberal member mentioned young people. I am one of those young people, as the Minister knows. I'm very proud. I'm not the only young person, obviously, in our caucus. And the challenges of home ownership and getting into the market, obviously, are very real for my generation. So I go to that aspect, Minister. Why is it important that we get shovels in the ground on infrastructure?
Yeah, because it's the difference between building hundreds of homes or thousands of homes and millions of homes. Frankly, there's not one community across the 444 municipalities that I have the privilege of working with that have not said to me that their number one issue of building homes has been infrastructure, sewer and water, and then the roads and bridges to support that. And then you go a step further, right? Once you have built that infrastructure, once you've built the homes, you also have to have the schools to build these types of communities. So one leads to the other. But ultimately, if you don't get a shovel in the ground, if you don't build sewer and water, you're not building homes. Full stop. And it is not just in our urban areas, it is in our rural areas. Many of our urban areas where they talk about four as of right also need millions of dollars.
That concludes the time. We'll now go to the opposition, MPP 5.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Minister, for being here. I have two lines of questioning. I just want to address some of the rhetoric from the other side, though. Only a fiscally conservative government would leave $357 million on the table when we all agree that we are in a housing crisis. And we should be doing everything, right? 88% of Canadians feel they'll never have the chance to ever purchase a home. Renters, 77% of the housing market in Ontario are really precariously housed renters. And yet the government has failed or refused to address that insecurity. But I'm going to ask you a couple questions specifically on Schedule 7 of the bill, Minister. And this was the repeal of the Hazel-McCallion Act. Of course, this is a piece of legislation that has had to walk back a number of poorly thought out pieces of legislation. The dissolution of Peel was found to be very expensive for Peel and Caledon and Mississauga. And so since that time, though, you did have a transition board in place. You are repealing and walking back this piece of legislation, but you've actually put a piece in the Act around immunity provisions. And part of those immunity provisions to protect you and the government is that this would include no costs or damages are payable for anything done under the Act, including acts of misfeasance, bad faith, breach of trust, or breach of fiduciary obligations. Now, when we had Peel come to our committee during pre-budget, they told us that the decision to dissolve Peel was already very costly for them, into the hundreds of millions of dollars, and impacted staff retention. We've since learned that this transition board has a bill right now of $1.5 million to find efficiencies. But the government has said that, Peel is going to have to pay the bill. My question to you is very simple on this one issue. Why is Peel being punished for a very weak piece of legislation?
Yeah, first let me address the $357 million that you're saying that we are leaving on the table and not spending. To be clear, no money has been left unspent. In fact,
it's promised to the province if you met those conditions.
Actually, no.
Yes.
$357 million was spent by the province of Ontario already. This is
and you won't get the money back. We understand that.
No, it's.
Can I just
we have
ask,
fronted the federal government their money because they usually take a lot longer to pay their bills. So, as an agreement with the federal government, we actually paid the $357 million of their money in advance. They're choosing not to fund the province of Ontario.
Okay, well, if we're going to stay on this topic, then we'll stay on the topic because you called the federal minister. I am reclaiming my time, please. You called the federal minister responsible for housing yesterday, the big bad housing minister. This is the kind of sandbox negotiations that don't serve the people of the province of Ontario. It's going to take federal, provincial, and municipalities to that was a good timing, to actually settle the housing dispute. But I, like my colleague, we urge you to work with the federal government to get that done. But the $1.5 billion bill for Peel residents, because of the Hazel-McCallion Act being repealed, why does Peel have to pay that bill when it's your government's fault?
Well, Question. For the first part, with respect to the National Housing Strategy, the federal minister has agreed to fund the program the way we have funded the program for 30 years, and that is through our service managers. There is literally no
Why
change.
is Peel getting the bill for $1.5 million?
To that question, sorry, I just thought you had, since you had asked the National Housing Strategy question, that you cared about affordable housing as well. So on the Peel side
I wish you cared
on the
about
Peel side
affordable
of
housing, Minister.
on
I
the
wish
Peel
you
s-
cared about affordable housing.
On the Peel side of things, the Peel Transition Board is working with Peel to help us better understand ways that we can not only review how Peel is doing things, but I think it will help shape and frame some of the discussions that we're also having right now, that the committee is having with respect to regional governance reform across the province of Ontario. So that's why I've increased that mandate for the Peel Transition Board, where those costs and impacts will have an impact on more than just Peel. Then it would be my intention to provide Peel with the funding that is required to offset those costs that they are taking right now. But the Peel Transition Board is in operation right now. They are working at the same time that a committee of this legislature is looking at regional governance reform.
Okay.
It struck me that it would be the perfect opportunity to utilize that service to work in conjunction with the Regional Governance Reform Panel. They're going to be coming forward with their recommendations in virtually the
But I
same
heard,
time period.
actually, what I heard is encouraging, because you said that you're going to help with, the government of Ontario is going to help Peel with some of those costs.
Of course.
I did hear that. The other thing is that in your opening comments, you referenced some of the positive feedback that this bill has received from stakeholders. Farmland for Farmers have said that, and I quote, that the Ontario needs more housing urgently, but not at the expense of future generations' food security and the environment. Bill 185 will be a disaster for farmland in Ontario, a far greater threat than the proposed development of parts of the Greenbelt on which the Ford government was forced to reverse course last year. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce has weighed in on the sustainability of planning and preserving farmland, saying that food security and economic stability are tied in with progressive, sustainable planning. This is actually playing itself out in Wilmot right now.
1 minute.
Why did you ignore your own housing affordability recommendations around preserving farmland, and Lisa Raitt, who was the Conservative deputy leader, who recommended that stronger protections for farmland and natural areas be an essential component of any measures that encourage more and better housing? Why have you abandoned the farmland in Ontario?
Yeah, I think just the opposite. The provincial planning statement in Bill 185 does focus around rebuilding infrastructure, first of all, rebuilding infrastructure in our urban areas. It also focuses on reallocating resources, as I said, along these old plazas, around major transit station areas. It is about utilizing the resources
there are parts around
that we have
intensification,
available.
Minister, but the acceleration and the loss of wetlands and environmentally sensitive areas, especially in farmland in Ontario, is baked right into this bill. And it's fiscally irresponsible, and it's
Thank you very much.
generationally
We'll now go to
irresponsible.
the Independent, MPP Samuel.
Chair. Good morning, Minister. According to Dr. Moffat, Ottawa is currently planning infrastructure and development charges to facilitate 82,000 homes instead of the 151,000 they have pledged to see built under your 2031 housing supply target. Do any of your regulatory or legislative changes incorporate 2031 housing supply targets for 1.5 million homes into planning requirements to ensure these homes are built, or are you counting on a hope and a prayer?
So everything we've been doing since actually 2018 has been building up to building the inventory that gets us to 1.5 million homes. So we started off in 2018 and in subsequent years with a transit-oriented community process. We made it easier to build around our major transit station areas. We're removing the parking minimums around those major transit station areas. The number one obstacle that we have been facing lately is not only high interest rates coming from the federal government, but we're also facing infrastructure, massive infrastructure gaps. In York Region alone, the difference between having sewer and water and building homes is...
You have to just redirect you and just reiterate again. You know, I understand the work that you purport to have been doing, But as your government falls farther and farther short of its own targets, do any of your regulatory or legislative changes incorporate the housing supply targets into planning requirements to actually make sure that homes get built?
Well, the use it or lose it, first of all, which is something that our municipal partners have asked for a very long time, helps us to redirect and ensure that our water and wastewater resources
that has nothing
are
to do
being
with housing supply
are being-
targets, though. Are they incorporated
Use it or
into
lose it has nothing to
regulatory
do- well,
or
then I guess-
legislative changes? Yes or no? It's very simple.
I guess if we disagree on, I guess the challenge is then the Liberals would disagree that interest rates have an impact on housing affordability. You would disagree then that that infrastructure, sewer and water capacity has an impact on building housing. You would disagree that a use it or lose it clause that allows municipalities to unleash stalled developments and reallocate that to those that are ready, shovel ready. This is why I suspect previous Minister Stephen Del Duca, now the Mayor of Vaughan, has said that the housing crisis started under a Liberal government, and this is why we are so focused on removing the obstacles. I think you have explained precisely in your line of questioning why the province of Ontario is where it's at and why we're working so hard to remove the obstacles that previous Liberal governments put in the way of building homes.
You know, I must admit there is one thing you mentioned I can agree with, which is that there are massive infrastructure issues, and certainly the FAO has pointed out that there's a $52 billion infrastructure repair backlog that your government is frankly barely touching. But I will move on. My next question for you is, do you have anything to say to the home builders whose projects no longer pencil due to Bill 185? And do you have anything to say to the purchasers who will bear the burden of those increased costs?
Sorry, the first part of the question?
Do you have anything to say to the home builders whose projects no longer pencil out due to Bill 185?
Well, I think the reason that some home builders are delaying projects is because of the massive increase in interest rates. So I'm not sure which home builders you're talking to, but the ones that I'm talking to, the 444 municipalities that I meet with, have said that the number one reason that developments are not going ahead for building homes, for building long-term care, for building university and college campus additions is because of the high interest rate increases.
Speaking to the chaotic and toxic home building environment created by this government, exacerbated by Bill 185, due to the unpredictable reversal in things like the 5-year phase-in period for development charges.
Our municipal partners across the board have asked us to look at how we did the phase-in. The phase-in will still exist over 18 months. We worked very closely with Ontario home builders to not only address Bill 109 challenges, but also the phase-in period so that it could be tied to a use it or lose it provision. We want to be able to use the resources and the infrastructure that we have in place more effectively, and that is why we are tying the phase-in to a use it or lose it. I suspect why our builders get a bit more frustrated is when
It's okay.
when
I
members
don't
such
need
as
you to
yourself,
I don't need
you
you
say
to
one thing in
pontificate.
public,
I
but then you
don't
go
need
to
you
community
pontificate
meetings
on
and
whatever. But you did mention municipalities, and I do want to invite you to say when exactly you'll make municipalities whole for the $5 billion that they are now suffering for because of your previous legislation.
As you know, with the changes in Bill 185, with the $1.8 billion infrastructure fund, with the $1.2 billion building
Thank
faster.
you very much. That concludes the time. We will now go to the government MPP Hogarth.
Thank you, Chair, and it's interesting to follow that. You know, the Liberals opposite, you listen to them, and the member from Scarborough, Guildwood, you know, the Liberals' plan to build affordable housing was chasing jobs out of the province. So when you lose 300,000 people, then you don't need housing for that. But I'll tell you, there is no government than this government under Doug Ford who's done more for Scarborough. And that's talking about building infrastructure. That is building houses. That's building long-term care beds. That's building a subway in Scarborough. So I just find it fascinating to sit here and listen to that because we have done a medical school, absolutely. Bringing more jobs to our province, our great province under Premier Ford has been a lifesaver for Scarborough members. And when we talk about you talk about housing being a crisis, well, crisis happens because of inaction. And who was in government before us? That was 15 years of Liberal rule, which did not do a thing, and that is why we are in a crisis situation now, which thankfully, under this minister, the previous minister, and this premier, we are actually getting shovels in the ground and building. Because if you're in Scarborough, if you're in Etobicoke, you can see cranes everywhere and things being built. Now, on some questions with regard to this bill, I think it's a great bill. I think there's some great ideas here for developers and for communities to get shovels in the ground quicker, faster. I know you touched a little bit on the use it or lose it clause in this bill, and one of my stakeholders was actually asking me a little bit about that, because we see a lot of vacant properties, especially in Etobicoke, and we want to see shovels in the ground. So I'm just wondering if, I'm going to have two questions, but my first one is just if you can just explain to us a little bit about that use it or lose it clause and how that will help get homes built faster.
Yeah, look, we've seen a lot of municipalities, my own included, where they have given approvals to build housing. They have allocated sewer and water capacity to those projects, and then the project does not get underway. And that housing that it follows them cannot move forward because the first proponent who has the sewer and water, for instance, allocated towards them is not getting a shovel in the ground. And they can't reallocate those resources. This bill allows them to reallocate the resources that are already in the ground to shovel-ready projects without taking away the first proponent's ability to continue on with the project when they are ready and if they are ready. It is a measure that our municipalities have long been calling for, and it will help spur on growth and development in communities where we've seen it stalled.
Thank you for that answer. And just on that, you know, in my community of Etobicoke Lakeshore, we had the former housing minister, who was a Liberal member, was the minister of the day, and tried to build some housing, but didn't think of building roads around those houses. So we have a bunch of communities. We have a Humber Bay Shores area which has one road. So when you add some bike lanes, there really isn't a way to get in and out of your house. I just want to talk about our transit-oriented communities and how that is really helping. We are, as a government, building complete communities versus tossing something in here, tossing something in there. So this is some of the infrastructure plan. It might be a little bit out of scope from this this bill, but I just think it's important to talk about how this government is building complete communities, which not just about the housing, but it's the transit part.
Yeah, look. If you're going to make massive investments in transit and transportation, you want to utilize those investments to build housing around that. And the transit-oriented community process that we started early on in government, frankly, along with the other measures that help speed up that development, both measures which were not supported by the opposition, which is it's ironic that they now come and ask us to move faster on our successful programs, and we're going to do that, right? So these have been instrumental in helping us move along, not only building transit and transportation, but you hit the nail on the head. It is about building communities. That is why we're making historic investments in rebuilding schools. The largest investment, whereas the previous government was closing schools, we're reopening schools, refurbishing those schools. And in your community, much like Scarborough, in other communities, frankly, you have these long plazas, for instance, right? You have these long plazas, single story with apartment on top on major transit routes. The provincial planning statement allows us to reuse those, to build more density along those quicker than we have ever done before. I hear the member from Scarborough shouting out and heckling about that. I know Scarborough. I grew up in Scarborough. I grew up in the very member's riding. I dealt with and worked as a constituency assistant in Scarborough East, which is now her riding. I understood then how underfunding by the previous Liberal and NDP governments led to different challenges in our housing, affordable housing stock then. That is why we're focused on rebuilding that stock. That is why we're focused on building around major transit station areas. We're getting the job done, and it frustrates the hell out of them, but we're going to continue to get the job done for the people of the province of Ontario.
Well, thank you, Minister. It sounds actually like it was a Liberal government who created this crisis. Yeah. I'll pass off to my colleague.
MPP Harris.
Thank you very much, Chair. And you did talk about jobs in Ontario, and I just wanted to highlight that in Waterloo Region during the previous government's tenure, we lost almost 15,000 manufacturing jobs alone, just in manufacturing, because of a lot of the things that you highlighted. And I just wanted to get that on the record, as we do have a couple of members from Waterloo Region here today. But short amount of time, I wanted to kind of get into the weeds on something. And you talked about bonds, surety bonds, letters of credit. This is something that I have heard from developers in Waterloo Region, home builders in Waterloo Region, that is a real true barrier to building homes. And I was hoping that you could maybe just touch a little bit on how this bill will rectify some of that.
Yeah, this is something we've heard from a lot of building partners that has become a challenge to them, and some of our municipal partners have said that there are different ways that we can do this. So we are consulting on it, and I hope to have something in the fall. I will just say this: Mayor of Waterloo, Dorothy McCabe, is strongly supportive. And congratulations to them. 700 affordable housing units that they're going to be bringing online. She's asked for, her community is asking for a ministerial zoning order to build those affordable housing units, and I intend to work very closely with the mayor to get this done. Doing a lot of great things in Waterloo, Kitchener-Waterloo area. We're going to help them succeed.
Great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 28 seconds. With that, we would conclude the time and thank the minister. That concludes the time for this presentation. We thank the minister for your presentation, and also thank all the staff who came to answer the difficult questions, and obviously there weren't any. So with that, again, we thank everybody here, and we will now stand recessed until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Thank you.